Hello, and welcome to another video from 3.5 Archive. Today I'm going to be talking about how I evaluate prestige classes for D&D 3.5. When you take a look at a prestige class, it's sometimes hard to tell whether or not it's worth taking at first glance. Sometimes you're going to think, oh, it has a very cool feature that I really want, and therefore I should take it. And other times you're going to look at its requirements and say those are way too restrictive, I would never take this. And really, to evaluate prestige classes, it's usually a balance. And the most important thing to look at is trade-offs. You need to ask yourself, what am I getting taking this prestige class instead of taking levels in whatever base classes that I would be taking? So if you're going to be playing a fighter and going into some sort of prestige class, you have to ask yourself, is this prestige class giving me the benefit of a bonus feat every other level? Or is it giving me less than that? And moreover, you need to look at, is it giving me such a good benefit that it's worth giving up the freedom of choosing my own bonus feat every other level? And even more so than that, you have to look at the requirements and say, is what I'm paying to get into this prestige class worth what I'm getting out of it? Which sounds like a very simple calculus, but sometimes it's hard to tell. If a prestige class requires you to have the weapon focus feat, and it's one that you were going to take anyway most likely, then it's really not a requirement. But if a fighter-oriented prestige class is asking you to take, skill focus in perform dance or something like that, then that's a feat that's right down the drain from the beginning, because as a fighter you would never take a feat like that unless you were trying to qualify for a prestige class. So not only does it have to make up for losing the fighter bonus feats, losing the flexibility of those feats, but it also has to make up for one feat that you've already sunk into just getting into the prestige class. And likewise, we have to look at it the same with caster-oriented prestige classes that give up levels of spellcasting. For example, the Argent Savant is going to give up a level of spellcasting right at the beginning. It doesn't have to pay back right away on that investment, so to speak, but it does need to eventually give you enough features that it's worth giving up not only a feat that you could have gained from continuing to take levels in Wizard, assuming you were a Wizard, but also that it's going to be worth giving up that level of spellcasting and putting you one level behind on gaining your next level of spells. So this sort of trade-off is kind of difficult to consider in a lot of cases because, situationality, which is the second main point, sort of leads into that. Situationality is how often a feature is going to come up. If you have a feature that gives you a +2 on saving throws against a particular spell, like maybe Disintegrate, that might never come up in an entire campaign. But if you have one that gives you a +1 on all of your, attack rolls with a certain spell type that you use a lot that the prestige class is focused on, then it might be great. Then again, if that type of spell doesn't require attack rolls most of the time, then it's going to be all but useless. So you have to ask yourself how often that feature is going to come up. If it never comes up in the campaign, then you might as well never have gotten it. And while D&D campaigns vary very widely in what kind of, monsters and other challenges that they contain, and what sort of situations they have in them, what, types of creatures show up in them and that sort of thing, usually we can, put a fairly good guess on what you're often going to run into. And so if you go into a campaign without knowing what you're going to be facing a lot of, then it's important to be able to pick a prestige class that's flexible. And if it's, specialized and it focuses on something about you, like focusing on your fire spells, your force spells, or your ability to fight with a scimitar, then those are all acceptable because you can choose what spells and what weapons you use. If it's something focused on what kind of enemies you're fighting or what kind of other challenges you're facing, then it's, a lot worse because you don't have control over that. And this is a big part of why the Ranger's favorite enemy feature is often considered to be pretty weak compared to a lot of other, features or potential ideas for the Ranger. So that's something we have to watch out for prestige classes, both, the value based on alternatives, and you have to look out for the situationality of those prestige class features. How often are they going to come up? The raw stats of a prestige class usually aren't that important. A lot of the time, if a prestige class has some really good features, it'll be worth giving up that good saving throw. One of the exceptions is for fighting-based prestige classes. If they don't have a full base attack bonus, it becomes really hard to take them. That's because a lot of combat for martial classes, for fighting-oriented classes, is based around their ability to deal damage. If they can't deal damage, and a lot of the time that comes from the power attack feat, then they're not going to be very useful no matter how good the prestige class features are. And most of them can't keep up with an extra, effectively +2 damage per level, which you're going to be getting from, sinking your full base attack bonus into your power attack feat. So those are just a few of the ways that we can look at a prestige class and evaluate if it's good or not. It's difficult to put all of this together holistically and decide whether or not it's worth taking levels in. And that's why I really don't adopt any particular objective metrics of evaluating prestige classes, because it really depends on the situation, depends on the campaign that you're going into. And so it's important to not simply go by the rating that we would give to it, but to kind of go through it and decide what situations it's good in and what situations it's not good in. So the third and final major way to evaluate a prestige class is by looking at how many dead levels it has. Dead levels are just levels that don't give you a feature. It's also another way to think about, levels that don't give you an advancement to your spellcasting for a spellcasting based prestige class, but that's a little bit less relevant in this case. Dead levels are levels where you don't get any features at all, and thus you're really not getting very much out of the prestige class, because odds are you either were getting something out of your original base class that you're missing out on, or getting nothing, in which case, you've broken even and you have paid the price in prerequisites to get there. For a 5-level prestige class, a dead level is all but unforgivable. For a 10-level prestige class, it can be excused if the feature that you're waiting for is one that is particularly powerful or potent, but given that the initiate of the Sevenfold Veil, for example, is one of the most powerful prestige classes in the entire game, and it doesn't have a single dead level, it's really hard to excuse other prestige classes that are less powerful from having them. Maybe the designer just couldn't think of a feature for that level, or maybe they just thought that it was thematically fitting to have one dead level before the next super powerful feature that the prestige class had. But if a prestige class has more than 2 dead levels, it's almost certainly right out in terms of consideration. And even just having one is quite frustrating. After all, you're giving up other character options in order to take this prestige class, and to offer nothing in return is going to be pretty annoying to have to deal with. Sometimes prestige classes actually seem rather packed with features compared to base classes, but this is done on purpose, and again, that investment that you make by meeting those prerequisites for a lot of prestige classes is going to more than justify getting those extra features. You want to be profiting from a prestige class, not even breaking even. And when you consider, the opportunity cost, where if a prestige class, gives you something that you could have gotten easier from another base class, you could have freely multi-classed into that base class and gotten that for free. So you really have to think about, and this goes back to alternatives, whether or not you were better off taking levels in another class to get what you wanted. And if prestige class can't sell itself on those metrics, then it's not going to be worth taking, because you could just grab those features from a base class and not have to do anything to qualify for it. So those are the ways that I evaluate prestige classes, the major ways. I look at the situationality of the features, I look at the potential alternatives that you could have taken instead of that prestige class, and I look at how many dead levels it has, and if the strength of the features beyond those dead levels are worth continuing to take it. You really want to look at prestige classes at a matter of what can you get out of them. It's one thing to treat them as a sort of goal in and of themselves, where you want to have your character have their goal and purpose be to get to that prestige class and take the full 10 levels in it. And a lot of characters work this way. They will get started on a prestige class and they will stick with it all the way to the end, no matter what. But if you really want your character to be the best that they can be, and sometimes there are other considerations, sometimes you really just want to finish that prestige class for the sake of it. But if you want your character to be the best that they can be, you're going to want to look at prestige classes critically and only take the levels that make you feel like you're getting the most out of them that you can. And that means looking through these criteria and evaluating them based on your own needs and on the campaign that you're part of. So that's just a little look into how I evaluate prestige classes. That'll be about it for today. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and so on. And I will see you next time here on 3.5 Archive.